Thank you so much, Paige. That was really helpful, and I can see from our attendee list that we have several state education agencies that have been highly involved in this work of early warning systems, and it likely kind of in that evolution have come across challenges with the engagement of parents. So as Paige noted in her presentation, an early warning system can help educators in schools identify or flag students who are at risk of not meeting key educational milestones like high school graduation. Of course, the milestones may vary and do frequently apply to high school graduation, but the concept's been expanded, and a great example of this is one that Paige highlighted is the Massachusetts Early Warning Indicator System, which I worked with the state on, and it identifies key milestones along the K-12 trajectory. So, for example, the state provides annual indicators that identify students as early as first grade who are at risk of not being able to read by the end of third grade. So it seems simple and a useful way for adults at the state, district, and school level to use data toward improving student outcomes, right? But for those of you, and many of you on the webinar who've worked with early warning systems and indicators, parental understanding of these indicators and systems really can vary greatly. And even though it seems to be a useful strategy to support students, parental concern for how these indicators are used can really challenge and sometimes even stop implementation of this strategy. Still, leaders and educators who have figured this out, how to engage parents in this process, report a great enhancement to their work and to their ability to get students back on track when parents are engaged. So my portion of the presentation really focuses on some of the key issues parents raise, as well as strategies and examples of strategies I've collected and observed over the past 8 years or so of conducting research and supporting state, district, and school level implementation in the area of early warning systems. So when thinking about parents and early warning systems, one of the critical challenges is really to demystify both what an early warning indicator and system are and how they're used at the school level. You know, rightly, many parents may be concerned about labeling or tracking students based on these data, and it's necessary for states, districts, and schools to clearly articulate the purpose and use of these data to help students. And these are the key points. Early warning indicators are really based on readily available data that can be checked frequently to monitor changes and especially improvements. So, for example, indicators might be attendance or course performance. They are predictive indicators, and they predict that a student is likely or not likely to meet a key educational goal or milestone. It's not a label, but it's a means for identifying students who need closer attention. And indicators are the early warning systems are based on data or indicators that are mutable. That is, with changes in student actions and behaviors, it's actually possible for a student to get back on track and no longer be at risk. And this is immensely important. The aim of using an early warning indicator and implementing a system is to use it as part of that system to support a student to get back on track. So furthermore, it's critical to explain to parents how this information is used to take action and improve student outcomes. To this end, early warning indicators and accompanying systems allow staff to observe changes in student risk status. They're a tool for educators to target student interventions in a timely way, and they provide information to educators so that adults can take action to support students early before problems get bigger. So for this reason, it's important to move beyond the predictive early warning indicator. Many states, like those that Paige highlighted in her presentation, and many of your states have rightly used their longitudinal data systems to provide districts and schools with early warning indicators. However, to allay parental concerns about tracking, it is essential to talk about how this helps students and explain the system that supports the use of these indicators. Now, this is an example of an early warning system called the Early Warning Intervention Monitoring System. It was developed as part of the National High School Center with my colleagues and I, and it draws on the key tenets of data use in schools in the context of an early warning system. But what's important about this graphic and the 7-step process is that it's very helpful in explaining how indicators are used as part of a broader system focused on targeting students in need and improving their outcomes. And of particular importance to parents are steps 4, 5, and 6. Those are the steps that are focused on understanding student needs, providing supports, and monitoring students to ensure they are going to get back on track to meet the key milestones. And this demonstrates that action piece that educators are taking to support students. So over the years, I've worked with states, districts, and schools implementing early warning system throughout the country, and based on this experience, I've identified some of the most frequent questions parents bring forth to educators and leaders who are using early warning systems and early warning indicators to improve outcomes for students. So they are, how are these indicators being used by educators in the school? If my student is at risk, will teachers stop helping him or her? What can I, as a parent, do to improve student engagement? Is this labeling my student? And how is this information shared with others in the school? And is my child's privacy protected? So next, I'm going to discuss some strategies used to engage parents in the use of early warning systems. So as I've already mentioned, communication is critical, and not just after the fact. Communication, but upfront, proactive communication that shares a broad set of talking points, often using multiple modes of communication to reach parents. And it's super important to ensure that staff are aware of these key talking points and that they're on the same page because they're talking to parents with regularity as well. So here are the key points addressed in these types of communication. That early warning indicators are looking at symptoms and not underlying causes, and that parents have an important role to play when trying to figure out what the underlying causes of risk a student's displaying are. That the information is used to take action to support students, and you're going to hear me say that over and over again. And the ultimate goal is to ensure that students meet a critical milestone, so meet high school graduation, for example. So student privacy, as Paige mentioned, is one of the most prevalent concerns raised by parents when thinking about early warning system, and clearly talking about student data in general, but in particular to early warning systems. So, and truthfully, the response by state, district, and school level leaders varies greatly, which Paige also mentioned in her presentation. FERPA is the federal law that dictates student and family privacy rules, and parents are just generally concerned that this type of information may be used to harm their students. Still, it is possible to use early warning indicators and maintain security, as many schools and districts have successfully done. And what I've observed is that the boundaries of school rules, and likely playing into what Paige was pointing out about the trust level and around student privacy, are dictated by community concerns and priorities. So it's challenging to provide any kind of blanket advice about privacy, except that district and school leaders have to carefully consider their context when communicating and sharing this information with parents. So another strategy to engage parents in the early warning system work and using information on indicators as a routine part of connection with parents. So this could mean sharing student data at the aggregate level. So observing trends in terms of the students who are displaying risk through general meetings with parents, newsletters, and other communication strategies, I guess weekly emails and those sorts of things. This provides information about what's going on in the school so parents have an understanding of how early warning systems data are being used and changes and adjustments that are being made over time. Another way to engage parents is through one-on-one discussions when a student is identified as at risk by an early warning indicator. You know, it's true that this can be an important part of the diagnostic phase, in fact, whereby educators are able to explore with parents possible underlying causes that have led to the student being at risk and actually come to some agreement about supports, programs, and or interventions that might be useful to support the student to get back on track. So what are the general guidelines for engaging parents that have been learned over years of work with districts and schools? Mainly, any purposeful strategy to engage parents with early warning systems need to be proactive, routine, targeted when needed, and demonstrate the opportunity for action or that action is being taken. So the following are some examples in which districts and schools have engaged parents. So this is an example of a school-level report. It includes fictitious data, and of course, schools should be careful, and this is not a good model, about reporting low numbers of students to protect anonymity. But in this case, it's all fictitious data. But this is a great example of how to share information about trends and what's going on in the school in terms of student risk and changes in student risk over time. So this is an example of a proactive strategy used by the Baltimore County Public Schools, and I have to thank the superintendent and assistant superintendent for allowing me to share this with you. This letter is sent to all parents of high school students at the beginning of the school year. It's like a form letter. And what I like about the letter is that it clearly explains the indicators and the thresholds and the expectations for students. So you can see I'm highlighting out because I know it's a little bit small for you on your screen. The indicators listed below are minimal indicators, and it demonstrates that they expect students to surpass them, and they address attendance, suspension, behavior, grades, and grade point average. So what you're seeing here is that it's routine and proactive and actionable, and that it clearly states goals. Another example of routine information sharing is this example from New Visions. It's an example of a report card, and it's integrated early warning indicator information into the report card. And so as you can see, the information, again, routinely provided to parents because it's part of the report card, and it shows both the indicator and the expectation. So you can see here, there's attendance. You can see that it states that the attendance rate percent is the percentage of school days you have attended the class, so it defines it, and then it tells you that you should have a 92% attendance rate or higher. It also demonstrates credits earned, and so it tells you what the required credits are as well as what the student has accumulated for credits. In this case, it's 30.24 credits, and then also what the student needs to graduate. So this, again, is a letter from the Baltimore County Public Schools, and this is a follow-up to the other letter, and it's only sent to parents of students who have been identified as at risk, so missing a key being identified through an indicator. This is an example of a targeted and proactive and actionable strategy, and what I like about the letter is that not only does it clearly state why the student is at risk, but it also provides an actionable step for parents to get in touch with an individual at the school to figure out what they can do about their student being at risk. So this is my final example, and it's from an early warning system tool developed by the American Institutes for Research, and it's a student-level report, an individual student-level report. And the report is used by educators during meetings with parents of students who are at risk. And it really exemplifies a targeted approach because the student's been identified as at risk and demonstrates that there is a routine monitoring of students and showing the actions, that is the interventions and supports that are being provided to a student. So in general, these are just a few examples of how educators can use strategies to engage parents. And just on a final note, I want to say I've certainly seen the gamut of parental engagement, ranging from completely avoiding parent engagement altogether to actively bringing parents into the early warning system process by obtaining additional help and support for students from parents. Of course, especially at the secondary level. Not all parents are highly engaged in student school life, but I can say even with that challenge of bringing parental engagement at the secondary level, in general, leaders and educators who do engage parents report it's an important piece of their use of early warning indicators and early warning systems, and it really enhances educators' ability to support students and get them back on track. So with that, thank you so much for your time, and I'm excited about the next presentation, which will provide you with some more resources that may be used to engage parents.